Hello and welcome to AngularAir. My name is Jeff Welpley. I'm your host today, and we have a great show in store. I heard that last week when I was away, they had a great show talking about Angular material that went really into depth, got really technical, talking about a lot of different things. This show won't be anything like that. It's just going to be us goofing off for an hour and shooting the shit. So let's get into things after I do a quick sponsor spot. That we have two sponsors for this episode. One is from Hire.com, who is going to be our new sponsor that's going to be ramping up, and they're going to be a great partner. If you don't already use them, if you're looking for a job or you need a new recruit, a new developer, definitely check out Hire.com. And also, there's a conference coming up in Israel, Angular-up.com. So definitely check that out. There's going to be a lot of great speakers there, and they give you a tour of the Dead Sea, just like it's a cool area to be in. So if you get the chance, definitely check it out at angular-up.com. And on the show today, we have our usual all-star panel, starting with Austin.
What's up, guys? How's it going?
And Justin Schwarzenberger.
Hey, what's going on?
And Mike Brocky.
Happy to be here.
All right, so in typical way that we run some of these discussion shows, we just want to get kind of an update from the panelists of what you guys have been working on to start off. And Mike, why don't you start first?
All right. Surprise, surprise, I have been working on the CLI. That's pretty much all I've really been doing outside of my day job, where I'm actually working on an Angular application. But just trying to get things ready. We've been nearing closer to release, trying to work out some bugs and trying to get our documentation up to date and helpful to people. Actually, I just got pinged earlier today about an issue with the docs of, hey, I'm trying to do this, but the docs say something different than what's going on. That's because we need to update our docs, and we're working on that. And also performance, trying to speed some things up with our rebuild times and as well as performance of the CLI itself, outside of building and live reload.
So, Mike, when are you throwing everything out and starting over again with the CLI?
Pretty much every Monday. We aim to do that.
So how's that going?
We've rebuilt it all since yesterday. We're doing good.
Has it been converted to Yarn yet?
All right. You want to talk about Yarn in the CLI? We can do that. So people have reported that they're using Yarn just fine with the CLI. So right now we're kind of letting Yarn get its bases put to it, and we will look into possibly integrating it later on. But for right now, if you want to use Yarn with the CLI, just do a --skip-npm to when you are creating your new project or initializing it, so that it doesn't install via npm, and then you can install all the dependencies from package.json with Yarn and manage it through Yarn. If that's what you want to do with your project, that's completely fine with us.
And then, last 2 episodes ago, I guess, we had a planning session about the CLI on AngularAir, where we kind of assigned you like 5 or 6 different tasks that you were supposed to complete. So I wanted to check in on that and see if all of those are done yet.
A few of them, yes. I think Justin brought up the one that was to be able to default the change detection strategy and the view encapsulation. And I believe that has already been merged into master. I don't know if it was part of the latest release. If not, it should be part of the next release.
Wait, are you kidding?
No. No. We actually.
Yeah, basically, if you guys want any work to get done, like Angular related, especially CLI related, just email mike@brocky.com and expect within a week or 2.
I don't own the domain. I wish I did.
We should start a petition so that he has to start wearing a broccoli head.
I'm in the market for one. Also, if anybody wants to register to try and get a broccoli emoji, I will change my Twitter name to be Mike and then the broccoli emoji. But it's not there yet.
Nice. I just got back from BlizzCon where there's a ton of cosplay, so I should have hit somebody up there to make you a broccoli head. That
would totally wear
probably been key. I wasn't thinking. Sorry.
I just got back from a Google developer group conference down in Florida over the weekend, and I sure enough wore my broccoli shirt for the speaking there as well. So I'll be happy to
How
keep
was
on
that?
doing it. What's that?
How was the conference?
It was great. I met a lot of really cool and interesting people. Some people doing different things, which was nice. Some people talking about Project Tango, which I'm not totally familiar with, but it's augmented reality. So got introduced to that world a little bit, as well as a bunch of Android developers. So kind of getting up to speed and learning a little bit more about what's going on with some native development directly native within Android, as well as a nice little NativeScript talk and talk to Dan Wilson from the NativeScript team as well. So it was a really good time.
Was that web and augmented reality, or just augmented reality?
Just augmented reality, not web-based.
Very cool. Anything else going on, Mike, in your neck of the woods besides the CLI walk?
No, I'm just here for my weekly status planning to see what you guys are going to task me with for the week.
Good, good. Yes,
I have this marked on my calendar. I have this marked on my calendar as Scrum.
And we'll see how well we can do that. All right, Justin, you mentioned that you were at a conference recently. What have you been up to?
Well, yeah, I was at BlizzCon, so it wasn't a tech conference; it was a gaming conference. So I had a chance to kind of relax and do some game stuff. So that was cool. Lately at work stuff, I'm really trying to figure out kind of our plan and our architecture for using ngRx and Redux. Trying to figure out some complex scenarios with our store model and our structure for our store, kind of thinking about how we want to normalize that and lay that out and react to that as well. One of the things we're kind of looking at.
Switching to React?
No, I react to it, not necessarily create React apps. So, thinking about things like one of the approaches we're kind of looking at is having our store model be represented with a couple segments, like a data segment and a UI segment, where the UI segment would be everything that's dictating in terms of UI, like this is open, that's open, you're dragging, you're dropping, this sort of thing. And then the data would be the data that we could, display and stuff like that. So a lot of that stuff lately. Yeah.
Cool, awesome. Now, from the chat within our Slack group, it seems like you've been doing a lot of stuff that you're enthusiastic about. So
I'm always enthusiastic.
Well, that's true. That's true. But yeah, what have you been up to? What's going on?
Yeah, so just last week, I was on the show, not too long ago, talking about my data table project. I rewrote it all to use on push. It's a pretty sizable change, actually. And as a result, I have about 50 new bugs.
Hey.
But it was a pretty interesting challenge to kind of take that from, whatever they call the normal change detection, and make it the on push and kind of switch it to making it reactive, right? So you can't just implement on push without making everything reactive. And so there took a lot of work to kind of make that.
Were you using ngRx, or what are you doing to make it reactive?
No ngRx. I mean, it's a dumb control, right? So you just it's one way down, right? And so, when you do things like, I don't know, you reorder the columns or something like that, it propagates it all the way up, right? I requested to reorder columns, and then you can decide if you want to continue with that reaction and push it all the way down. And so there's no store or anything like that. I just can't get my head around Redux pattern. I don't know what it is. I struggle with it, I just can't get my head around it. But work in progress, of course. So I've been working on that, had a big new release there. We did 1.0. I redid the demo page, so we've got a pretty demo page now. Everyone loves demos. And yeah, we're just kind of moving forward on some of that. Another project that I don't think I've talked about on the show, I think Justin might have brought up though, is a charting library that I've been working on as well. Basically the premise behind it is, instead of kind of using the craziness of D3s like jQuery-esque syntax, we wrote a data visualization library using Angular, where Angular actually paints the SVGs, and then we actually are still using a little bit of D3 to actually handle the math. D3's got an awesome library for all that stuff. So we're still using a little bit of D3 to handle some of the accesses and some of that type stuff. But overall, it's using SVGs to paint it, which just opens up like a slew of craziness that you could start doing with, AOT and Universal and NativeScript and whatever we call NativeScript now, but et cetera. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty much what I've been working on.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. I will give some. I've been crazy busy like usual, but specifically, we just announced this past week something I've been working on for a long time that I have actually mentioned in other previous discussion shows, that we were trying to raise money, and so we finally closed a round for Get Human, our seed round of funding. So definitely excited about that. It's sort of, I have a lot of thoughts, probably a whole series of other podcasts talking about just that whole process and that type of thing for people that are interested. But in short, it's been an interesting experience because over the past 3 years, yeah, something like that, we've been just bootstrapping, and the mentality of bootstrapping and building your business kind of incrementally and kind of like grinding it out is completely different than when you take on venture capital. And not necessarily good or bad. I mean, there's advantages, disadvantages, but it was one of these things that we actually thought about what we wanted to do and whether to do it at all, because we could have just kept on going the way we were. But I think ultimately it is going to be a good decision, and certainly, now having kind of like successfully raised a little bit of money and able to like start moving to the next level of our business, I guess there's a lot of excitement, a lot of like passion for our kind of long-term goals, trying to achieve those. So then what that means is a lot of stuff in terms of the things that I'm specifically working on. So we're hiring lots of people. I have a couple of people start last week, and then next week we're building all sorts of new stuff. So just like Justin was talking about how he's in the thick of it, building out a new architecture for all the Angular 2 stuff, I'm actually doing the same. We actually have pretty massive code base of a variety of different apps, mostly Angular 1 based. And we're building kind of the foundation for our next stack of for all of our new apps, and a lot of interesting stuff in that. Two things of note I just like kind of quickly wrote down here. I mean, there's a ton of things, like interesting things as I was kind of going through stuff. One like really small thing that like no one actually would, I guess, care about this unless you were trying to use Angular's DI on the server side, like on not just for the web, like for your actual API. So like one of the things I'm trying to actually extend all of the Angular 2 concepts throughout the code base. So using TypeScript throughout the code base, using the code base. And one interesting thing is that even if you are using DI, like in your API layer, let's say with Node, you don't actually have to use any Angular libraries at all. What you can do is just create it in such a way so everything is kind of class encapsulated, just like you would with services for the front end. And you have to expose just like a basic plain old JavaScript object for your providers, just like you would with a library of front end services. And the one thing that was like annoying me, that I was like, but you have to like, you do have to include the Angular library for just like that one decorator, for the injectable decorator. And that was like really like annoying me that just like for that one little thing that I had to include the whole Angular core library in on the API side. Not that it matters that much, but it's just like a weird thing. But then Pavel who does a ton of work in the community, pointed out that actually you don't. Like actually that decorator, that @injectable that you put on your services really doesn't do anything. All it does, having any decorator at all, and as long as you have in your, it's a TypeScript thing that in your TS config, if you have on emit, whatever it's called, on emit decorators or something where it actually emits the type information. So you set that flag in your TS config, then anytime you have any decorator in any class, TypeScript during the transpilation will include the type information for the constructor in the transpiled JavaScript. And that is what allows, when DI is going through your, instantiating your different classes, that's how it picks up on, okay, this type to kind of those kind of sub-dependencies that you're passing into your constructor. So knowing that, things really easy. Then I didn't have to include any Angular at all. And I just had some other whatever. I created my own injectable decorator, which really just didn't do anything. But you add it to basically all of your backend API service classes, and then when you kind of bring everything together, you obviously have to use, when you actually spin up your server, you have to use the Angular reflect injector to kind of like at the top level to kind of bring everything together. But the great thing is that you don't have to use that at all throughout the rest of your code base.
When's the blog article?
Anyway, yeah, I should actually. That probably would be a good one. I'll write one up this weekend for that. But no, this is like such a niche thing. But I just thought it was interesting. So whatever. Other work on how to create multi-platform apps. Like it's something with Angular Universal, obviously, I've been interested in for a while, of like, rendering the client and server, like, having this app that you write the same code base using in multiple places. And so now I'm really interested in doing it on native too. So I've been, in particular with NativeScript, been doing a lot of stuff with that. And we're gonna have a topic later in the show talking about NativeScript in particular. But a lot of interesting stuff in starting to see exactly how you can code like effectively. And I think we don't have like the final answer yet, but I actually am really looking forward to, in like 6 months down the road or something, having definitely a good blog post, a good talk material, basically going over how you can actually share your templates, your actual UI layer, native and web, which is, I think most people right now, and even the NativeScript people themselves, they say that like they're more like, oh, use different templates and then use the same like service layer, or the same like using ngRx or whatever, you can share something like that. But I think you can go further. So I mean, we'll see how far that goes, but that's at least something that we are diving pretty deep into. Fodder for a lot of future discussion. And then, and then the last thing I was just going to talk about was, so as a result of, kind of new stuff that I'm working on and expanding team and whatever, I'm starting to like cut down some of my other responsibilities. So like actually, Angular Universal, which I'd already started to kind of less and less of over time. Jeff Cross has been doing a lot more with from the Angular core team of taking over that library, and so actually both Patrick and I are starting to more and more to Jeff Cross and Alex Rickabaugh and a couple other people on the Angular core team, and with the idea being that their universal stuff is in that separate universal repo, but they're actually starting to pull a lot of the biggest pieces into Angular core itself, which is going to be actually great for everybody all around, because that'll just mean that there's going to be more improvements more frequently. There's going to be more people working on it. So that's all definitely good news. Talking with them and just trying to like with some of that transition, but they are taking over, you know, a lot of that, and we'll probably have just like a lot of the sugar, you know, the stuff that isn't as critical to like the core of Angular, like just like nice the sugar libraries, nice to haves or whatever, that will remain kind of as third party of core. And then that's pretty much it for me. I'm also paring down conferences in 2017, so like I'm gonna do a whole thing at ngConf for a workshop, but I think I'm gonna defer that. Hopefully by the time of Angular Connect next year, I'll be back into the thick of things. But these first like 6 months is pretty critical for a lot of the stuff that we're working on.
Any plans to attend the NG Cruise conference?
No, you know, I really wanted to. I loved talking about that with Tracy. Like basically the next 6 months, there's like a very specific set of, like we basically promised investors, like as part of like money, right? They like, okay, you got all this money, you have to actually like give things. So especially these first 6 months are super important. Then there'll be like a little bit of breathing room. So like I pretty much are blacking everything out during that time, and NG Cruise unfortunately is during that. So yeah. Hey, Alyssa, how are you doing? We haven't gotten to you yet, so why don't you jump in right there, and we basically been going around just talking about what we've been working on, what we've been doing, and that type of thing. So yeah, let us know, what have you been doing?
Cool. So I am a GDE as of the last like 6 months, so that's kind of cool. I've gotten some connections to that, and so I've actually been talking a little bit with like the Firebase team about what they have and what they're doing. So that's been cool on the Angular Firebase side. But as far as my daily job, it's kind of not as exciting because I'm rewriting Angular 1 to 1.5 components, and then our plan is to move those into Angular 2. And it's kind of this monster of an application. And so it's one of those things where you're like, you have JavaScript files that are the no-touchy JavaScript files, because they touch so many things that as soon as you start to refactor them, you don't even know where to start testing because it's just gotten out of control. So I'm trying to learn the best ways of writing for the future of, like, obviously this is Angular, so writing for the future of this Angular app so that we can be like, you know, future thinking and like we want to get this over to 2, but also not breaking the crap out of everything. So that's been kind of a fun learning experience, and I'm excited to actually get to the point where like I get to be on your side where you're like working with Angular 2 and not just getting to that point. But yeah, so and conferences, yeah, applying at lots of conferences. So
to be clear, I mean, I think that I'm probably like most people, and actually, Justin, I don't know if you're in this case, but for us, like I am actually separating out like the transition, like our Angular 1 to Angular 2 transition, like actually migrating that code versus like greenfield, like, you know, okay, there's a brand new app that we have to create. And so a lot of the stuff we're doing right now is more the greenfield type. And like for us, I mean, I think to each have a slight variation of this plan. So I'd be interested for you guys in particular, like which variation you guys are doing. But for us, it's like a hard line, okay, greenfield, anything else, Angular 1 for right now. And then once we have our Angular 2 apps in production and we start like creating a better plan, like, and just like you're talking about, Alyssa, maybe you start to iterate a little bit on your Angular 1 apps to like get them closer. And only then later on down the road will we start kind of the migrating. And in particular, my co-founder really wants us to like invest in like automated tooling, like our own custom automated tooling with the way that we built things to see how much we can kind of like things. Again, once we have on the like next generation side. So listen, like
automatic converter.
What's that awesome?
I know, I want to know more about that tooling.
That's what I heard.
So for us, it's not everything that we can do it with, but actually, just because of the way we built our Angular 1 app, we actually can in some cases, because we did build, even though in the Angular 1, with Angular 1 library, we built it in a component-based way with a very specific format. Like every single component is in the exact same format. Like we were actually really good about structuring that way. So that sort of lets you do some like transpilation stuff in an automated way if you build the right tooling, which is what I'm starting to look at. But like it's a until you like actually have your next gen like fully solid, because then you just like don't know what you're actually converting it to. But once you do, then like it's much easier. You can like you have like the, and you can kind of not with everything, but with some stuff start to.
How long have you worked on like that like project or app in particular? Like, were you there from the beginning?
Yeah. That's the thing, is
Okay.
that I created from scratch 3 years
Nice.
ago in Angular 1
Okay.
from the beginning.
Oh, that'd be so nice.
So all the sucky code is your code, right?
Yeah, exactly. I got no one to blame except myself. Yeah, that is true. So what were you guys going to do for the transition? So you're iterating now to improve your Angular 1 app. Like, then what are you going to? Are you just going to like see how it goes, or do you have any thoughts of what you're going to do in the future?
Well, right now it's a startup, so there's 4 devs, and it's me and one other front-end dev and then 2 back-end devs. And so right now we're still having the conversation about keeping CoffeeScript around, and my other front-end dev really thinks that we can do it and that we should do it. I feel like kind of a noob in this area, so I don't want to be like, no, we must TypeScript. But at the same time, I don't really see a ton of CoffeeScript and Angular 2 resources out there, so that worries me a little bit. But
CoffeeScript is technical debt.
I know. That's what I was like, how long is this going to be even a thing? Because right now there might be, a couple of people out there doing it, but I feel like it's mainly TypeScript. So I don't know.
Only Ruby people do it.
It was funny.
How did you know? We're Ruby on Rails people.
Oh yeah, of course.
As you mentioned CoffeeScript, I watched Austin. He turned into a time bomb. And as soon as that countdown of when you were done talking, he was just going to explode with some sort of comment about CoffeeScript.
So yeah, I think it's more of a see how it goes right now, because we haven't even decided like exactly if we're going to continue using CoffeeScript. And I think it's just a scary move because of how not organized. Your app sounds like a dream, honestly, because I was like, oh wow, you get to use tooling to just transpile everything. That's wow. So I don't know. I don't have a battle plan yet, but if you have, any advice, that would be awesome.
Don't do it.
Well, I mean, I think that I see developers all the time like take hardline stances on opinions that are really tomato, and that is like kind of frustrating. So it's like, and I think what I'm hearing from you, I think I feel sometimes too, where like I'm afraid, like I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the person who like what feel in your gut like this doesn't seem right. It's like, okay, how much do I really want to argue this thing that's like an actual like issue, or is it just like my own uncomfortableness? And you kind of like almost are waging that.
That's like a daily thing. It's not even on like just JavaScript side, but it's like when I'm doing like front-end designs or working on the back end, it's like, is this just me being stubborn, or is this actually what's best for the user, the right way to do it, the way that will be like easiest to maintain in the future? So haven't really found that voice yet.
But to me, there's a big difference between tomato and tomato pumpkin. they're vastly different.
But how do you identify pumpkins, right? Like,
and that's what I was going to get to, is that like
script,
it's hard.
And
it's hard sometimes, like, but with this very specific issue, I can't say for everything or like have even a general framework of how you figure that out, but I can tell you that for this specific issue, a strong foregone conclusion that like the community has honed in on TypeScript for Angular 2. Just to give you some indications, which like is fodder for this. So originally they were going to do documentation like on the Angular.io site in like languages. They were going to do it in like ES5 and TypeScript and ES6 and CoffeeScript, whatever. But I think they eventually gave up that because they're like, no, forget that. Like it's easier just to do one. Everybody's doing TypeScript. TypeScript makes a lot more sense. It looks better with Angular 2. The core team clearly uses TypeScript. They've already kind of bought into the fact that they don't even have to like in many examples outside of TypeScript stuff, and they kind of just leave it up to the user to decide. And
so it's one of those things where you can almost look at the community and who's using it based on whether it's pumpkin or what was it, apple?
Tomato. I've actually got I actually had a, if anyone knows me, I was like big anti TypeScript, and actually had a really interesting conversation at ngConf with Brad and the team about why TypeScript, right? Like why are we going to use something that is like like CoffeeScript? No, I'm just kidding. But like why would we deviate from like the spec, the ECMA spec, etc.? And there's actually and I don't. And you guys can feel free to correct me on this, but there are some actual things that either haven't landed yet or are coming very soon that will only be eligible for TypeScript. Things that you can like shorten because of your AOT, right? Like I can cut down variable names of classes and things like that. And I can cut those down from my 20 long foobar fun component class name to like foo or F1 or whatever that may be, and that those things are only available through TypeScript and having that type reflection and things like that. So
you said that you weren't always on board with TypeScript. What won you over?
I didn't say that I was won over. No,
you can say that now though if you want to. You can admit that now if you like. Here's a platform.
I think that the general adoption that I've seen in the community, because I don't know if you've ever looked, TypeScript's actually been around for forever, right? And no one has used it except for the like crazy C#.NET developer you have on your team. But in all seriousness, the adoption has really grown substantially, and I think as you start seeing, more people using it, just the tooling, right? I have been doing this for a while, and I was like, I don't need types, right? But once you kind of get in there and you start using it, it's like, oh, I didn't have to reload for that to tell me that I mistyped that, right? So there's a lot of like tooling benefits, and then everyone knows types are going to land eventually. It's just like classes. Everyone fought it for forever. And they eventually happen.
It just feels like we're giving up our JavaScript soul, like we're the hipster kids and we don't want to go to all these like rules, right? Like what? No. So
you can always write ES3.
Wait, and oh, go ahead, Justin.
For me, I really look at it as I'm writing future forward JavaScript and I'm saving it as a TS file. And then eventually, maybe I want to sprinkle in some types or whatnot, and I get to there. But really, I focus on TypeScript as being the solution for writing future-forward JavaScript, and not really having to buy into what you might say the TypeScript things until I really decide I want to go that route. So
there's always the Babel plugin, remove flow types that you can use if you ever just want to get rid of all of it.
I was at a conference 2 weeks ago in Kansas City. It was a DevOps conference, and I had some other front-end people like approach me after they heard my talk, and they were like, have you heard the good news about Elm? And I was like, the tree? Like elm tree? And so that it's just so funny that, we're talking about basically bastardizing this, TypeScript by pulling out all these things. That's the reason people are like, you should use it, just to make it more like the good old JavaScript. I feel like people who love things like Elm would kind of be blushing right now at
Well, so just on that subject, like I feel like, there's a couple different extremes, or like there's a spectrum basically of typing and functional programming, and like maybe not just like one line dimensional type thing, but there's languages like that are further on the extreme, Elm, maybe like PureScript, some other stuff like that goes even deeper than TypeScript does. I feel like, and this is just for me, everybody kind of has their own kind of opinions on this. This is a tomato thing. This is not one of those like things that is definitive. But for me, TypeScript is like the right balance. That it follows. It is JavaScript for all intents and purposes, and then it's kind of like just filling in there the typing, kind of like adding it to enhancing it a little bit. Which is very different if you then going like full force into something like PureScript or whatever else, where it's just like or there's a couple other ones like that are good in some perspective, because it's not that it's more pure. It's more like this is how it's supposed to be. It's like a rethinking of implementing types and functional programming and everything. But I don't know. I guess it comes down to sometimes a personal taste thing and what you're used to.
I think one thing is worth pointing out, and I believe it was a tweet by Justin, our super panelist over here on my left, that he said that the only thing that you need from TypeScript, or to use TypeScript within Angular 2, is just for dependency injection. As long as you're just using the type of the class, you don't necessarily need to type anything else. But to save you from having to create a token for dependency injection by writing raw JavaScript, that in itself is a reason enough to write your files using TypeScript.
But do you think that people will look down on you for only using that part of TypeScript, right? Like, are people going to look through my code and be like, oh, noob? Yeah.
No, I'm not saying that's really what I do. I'm just saying that that's really the only thing that really saves you a whole lot of extra work. Is just to, when you're using dependency injection, if you want foo service, just say that you're injecting foo service of type foo service, and you don't have to type anything else. No other types need to be specified in your application. But just
in my app, I actually am using Babel with a dependency injection plugin that someone wrote that literally just kind of does all that magic for you, and I don't have types. My app is really old, not old, but relative, right? And it's got a lot of Angular 1 code. And so the value, and I'm wanting to add Angular 2. And so the value of like doing that huge migration when I can just use this plugin, and I've already been using Babel, it kind of made sense.
Yeah, so I think that, like, for me, when I focus on that, I mentioned that because I hear a lot of people all the time saying, well, I don't want to do Angular because of the TypeScript thing. I don't want to do the TypeScript thing. And it really, I think if you look at it and break it down, it's like you only need to really do that for constructor injection. And the rest of it is really just future forward JavaScript. So whether you're doing Babel or something else like that, I mean, you're kind of doing that same pattern, right? So, so just kind of trying to get that thought process of like, look, this is not a barrier to entry to doing Angular and this sort of thing. It's like really, it's not as bad as a lot of people write about in terms of, oh no, TypeScript sort of thing. So I just want to kind of dispel that and make that, look, you can get in there, you can still write your JavaScript, right? And then you can just adaptively decide, I want to do more typing, I want to ride with type inference, whatever you want to do sort of thing. But it's really not that much of a barrier. I got to find this other tweet that a really good description as well. So I'll see if I can find that. But
although I would say with what you're saying, Justin, is that the caveat there is that in my mind, it's not quite like a solid like spectrum like you're thinking. Like there is like one side where, okay, I just want to use it for sugar for a DI, in which case if that is truly all you're doing and you don't want to be annoyed by constant warnings from the TypeScript compiler, you end up like turning off a lot of the compiler stuff, right? In which case you actually don't get a lot of the benefits from the other side benefits of TypeScript. So yeah, okay, you're basically just achieving at that point having something a little bit nicer sugar for DI, and like that might be good enough. It's totally legit. To turn on the normal sets of like warnings and errors, like when you're doing TypeScript compilation. I mean, some people I guess just ignore them, like they or whatever. I'm just like my personality or something like that. I can't do that. Like if there's just the smallest one, I'll spend like hours fixing some dumb typing issue that like, it doesn't actually stop anything. Like you still run your app, but like, no, I got to get rid of this. Why is it saying that Node was already brought in? Like, what? So there is still some of that, but I think from what I've seen, at least, a lot of those types of frustrations are sort of short term because they're mostly related around like not understanding some of like the particulars for some like for external libraries most of the time. Like for me, this is what I've seen. Like for when you're bringing in other libraries and like managing some of the types for some of those other dependencies, you run into like some issues if you don't know how to like set it up correctly. But once you get past that, and especially once you start building a larger code base, I mean, I guess that's key, is that if you're building like a small app, then I don't see any much of value. But like if you're building a larger code base, you have more than a couple people on your team, I just think there's huge benefits. Like, and everyone I know that has actually given it a legit shot in those types of environments, seen those benefits, have reaped the rewards. I don't know of anyone who and I'm sure there is, but who have actually given it a fair shot in larger app, and they're just like, forget this, and they threw it away eventually. Like they eventually like do see the value when you're refactoring, when you're running into issues.
Austin, are you saying you have one?
I'm we're still rocking Babel, right? Like, or however you say it. And like, it would be awesome if some genie like that wear a broccoli head would come and refactor all my code to TypeScript tonight, but I'm running Babel and I don't have TypeScript type acquisition errors every 5 minutes and that type of thing, and it works fine for me, and I think it's what works best for you, right?
Is your app pretty large?
60,000 lines of code on JavaScript front end only.
Good Lord.
Nice.
I have you up and running in TypeScript in about 10 minutes.
I'll quote you
question, but I don't want to just stick to the TypeScript topic for the whole episode. So let's jump to a couple other quick things that I wanted to make sure we got to. The first of which being that NG Europe just occurred. Now, because I spoke at Angular Connect, I am not legally allowed to Europe talks, or so that's what I'm assuming is the case. So you guys let me know what happened even. Did anybody actually show up to that conference? What happened? Anybody watch it? Maybe that's the thing. Maybe it didn't occur. I don't know.
It definitely occurred, and I've watched talks online, but I did not attend. But there were some very, very interesting talks that came out of that. Taro gave an amazing talk about its music-based application that is just absolutely beautiful, and both via the audio and the visual. So it was a really, really well put together talk. Again, having fun with Angular, not just the typical line of business application, but it was just a really well put together talk.
Yeah, there's a talk, Andre Saltz, I think, on RxJS, breaking that down and really going, I just started to watch it, but I've heard about it, that it really does a good job of breaking down it from a raw standpoint of building up observables and stuff like that. And that was supposed to be a really good one as well.
Yeah, Andre is an interesting guy. He's the author of Cycle.js. And if you guys haven't had the chance, I highly recommend that you look on egghead.io. I believe all the Cycle.js, I believe. And it's super interesting, even, I mean, if you have no intention of actually using Cycle, because it's a framework built completely on Rx. Like, it's basically Rx to like the extreme of just like, okay, what if we just did everything reactive, like from top to bottom, framework just on that. And so it's really interesting to see what things look like when you like kind of go to that extreme. And you can actually take a lot of the stuff that he talks about in his Egghead videos to Angular, to using RX in Angular, which I'm not sure if he talked about that in his talk, but I'm sure most people that know his work that same thing as well. Anyone else see any other ngAir talks?
I might be biased.
There was an Angular ngAnimate talk that was really good. I am desperately needing the expression so I can do tokened animations.
I have no idea what you're doing right now.
I don't know.
What is that?
That's my impersonation
Like a
of
sea anemone
expression.
or something.
Do you mean like anime, like the art style, or anime like animations?
Animations.
Oh, I was like, there was an anime talk?
That would actually be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Someone's got to propose that for ngConf.
I submitted my
anime.
Panda talk, my ng Panda talk for ngConf.
Very cool. Did you the rest of you guys submit ngConf talks already?
Yeah, I submitted an ngConf talk and an ng cruise talk.
What are you talking on? Can you tell us?
I'm not talking on anything yet. I won't know till Valentine's Day.
I did ng cruise too. I submitted a talk up there too. I'm going to be talking about WebVR.
Cool. It's a good topic.
I submitted to ngCruise. I have not yet submitted to ngConf. I'm still trying to think of something. But speaking of things that I've talked about, there's also a really good talk by Hans Larsen, who works for Google, works on the CLI at ngEurope. He gave a really nice talk at ngEurope. Told a really nice story along with his talk, so it was really interesting and gives you a little bit more information about the CLI. I might be biased, but that's all right.
Very cool. All right. So yeah, everybody check out the talks online. And also wanted to talk about today NativeScript. So I mentioned earlier we were gonna. So I wrote a blog post like 2 months ago, something like that, maybe a little bit longer ago, about the idea of like we have this thing called NativeScript, which was built just as its own mechanism, JavaScript-based framework to build native apps, similar to React Native, but its own, not associated with any framework, just its own thing. And a different philosophy than React Native in certain areas, one of which being that NativeScript higher level API that abstracts out the specific iOS or Android APIs. And you can actually use those. And one of the cool things with NativeScript, besides that higher level abstraction, is that at the lower level APIs, basically they have something that generates lower level API for anything that exists within the actual native libraries. So in other words, there's parity, the specific native libraries, and then the JavaScript wrapper around those. Whereas with React Native, it's like a subset. So you end up actually having to write, native like iOS code, like actual like in Swift or whatever, more frequently than not. Like I've seen, at least from people I've talked to, and this is probably evolving over time, but at least the people I've talked to that have created React Native apps, it ends up that like 20%, something like that, of their app is still not JavaScript. It's the actual native code. Like, there's some stuff that they can share, but they're writing a lot of code, specific for iOS or specific for Android. So there are some like differences, in sort of approach and that type of thing. But NativeScript, earlier this year really attached itself to Angular 2, built a renderer within Angular 2 so that you can write an Angular 2 app with templates that render, using NativeScript, directly to the. It's been growing steadily in popularity. It's been kind of exploding the past couple of months, especially. And so, I wrote this blog post a couple months ago about how, really, it's a mouthful to say NativeScript with integration to Angular 2. That's just like, and it's boring, and it's, whatever. It's much sexier to just say Angular native. Like just in those like 2 words, you kind of like see, people understand, like, because you understand what React Native is. A lot of people do, because it's like pretty popular at this point. And it's like, oh, okay, this is the Angular version of it. The only of confusion that I've heard is whether, it's Angular using like this exact same thing as React underneath the scenes, and it is like something different. But besides that, like it's something that I think most people can grok pretty. But the problem came, and what? Oh, Austin's combing his dog as I'm talking. What are you doing?
Pay attention, Austin.
Totally distracting. So anyway, I'll get to the point. And basically, what I didn't realize that I inadvertently stepped in a big pile of poo, because and that totally, Austin, you totally just got in my head with the dog. Okay. Anyway, because it's a big difference is that NativeScript and the Angular core team, Angular is run by Google, and NativeScript is run by Telerik, which is owned by Progress, 2 separate companies, right? Whereas they're both under the same company. And so even though technically there are some like open library stuff that is called like Angular something, it ended up being kind of like somewhat sensitive issue around calling something officially at like such like a high profile thing, Angular something, like Angular native, because the insinuation that it's actually the Google team that's actually controlling it, which they are not. It is actually the NativeScript team. They have, like, the Google team has literally nothing to do with it, other than kind of we need help. So the weird thing is that this just a kind of innocuous kind of suggestion by me led to this like cascade of weird discussions, and like to the point where like basically everybody had to come together and they were gonna like actually call this. It was something that I think that they agreed not to call it Angular native for those reasons that I mentioned, and are actually gonna just market it as NativeScript for Angular, which is
it always,
not as sexy.
Always cracks me up how much time is spent on names. Like when we were working, it was like almost 2 years ago now. I was working on the Angular course at Code School, and we were going back and forth on Angular or AngularJS, and I think we ended up going with the JS. And now I think it was last week that they were talking, and they said that they're getting rid of the JS. And so it's just so funny how much time you can spend on just something. But you have to think about what are people going to, like you're saying, the connotations behind, oh, it's the Google team or it's not. So yeah.
I would honestly waver back and forth. Like I would go for like a week where I would just be like, oh my God, this is not even worth, why am I spending any time talking about this and like arguing with these different parties about anything, and like, why am I even doing this? I don't care that much. But then I'm gonna be like, actually, like, but it would be like actually pretty useful. Like it's a name, but like it's actually a name is like, names matter. Like, and so then I flip on the other side, and then I would argue it again, and
and then you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, what am I doing with my life?
I just had to pull up this pie chart here. It is so perfect.
Can you zoom in? Like zoom on the pie. Ooh.
What are programmers' hardest task? Naming things, 49%.
This is good. Oh, well, but okay.
So
what did you say, Mike?
So the name may not be official, but anytime that I hear NativeScript, all I can think of is Angular native, I assume that it's a NativeScript application used in Angular. That's the only thing that comes to my mind, and that's just me from where I'm coming from. So to me, NativeScript means Angular native.
Yeah. Well, anyways, the point, NativeScript is awesome, and also, by the way, I just want to make sure I point out that it says nothing about, like, I still love Ionic as well. Like I both the libraries as like two different use cases, whereas like NativeScript and React Native are like sort of like direct competitors, like where you either, if you're on React, you probably are going to go with React Native. If you're on and you need a like something really close to the metal, then you probably are going to go with Angular Native or NativeScript, whatever. But I actually view Ionic as like something like you can certainly build whatever apps you build in NativeScript in Ionic. I think Ionic is, for web developers, much easier to get started, and most people, I recommend actually for most people to actually start with Ionic first and like see if you can actually, what you can do with your mobile app, just because it's like so much easier for a web developer to get into, like all the concepts are much more aligned. But when you have a need where like you actually have want to like get a level deeper, to do an Ionic, but I just really enjoyed for that type of situation using and kind of building things that you actually have control over all of the like native functionality in a much easier way. But anyway, so that was that, and obviously I see that Mike is a big fan too. Is that we both have NativeScript shirts? Is that, Austin, are you wearing a NativeScript shirt too? Or is that just a blue
this
shirt?
is just some blue shirt that I found because I wanted to match you guys.
Okay.
I'm not kidding. We did this right before the call.
That's Austin's TypeScript shirt.
Oh, no, it's my CoffeeScript shirt.
All right, we're right at the top of the show, so let's get into picks, and I'll save the last topic for my pick. So why don't we start off with Mike with your picks?
Sure. I have two picks. The first one, no surprise, we just actually talked about it. My first pick is NativeScript. Both a pro and a con for it. I think it tells a really compelling story about what you can build with NativeScript. And I spent some time talking to Dan Wilson on the NativeScript team this past weekend down at DevFest, Florida, and he really painted an even better picture. The only negative that I've come across with it is I've been racking my brain to try and find an app to write with, to write using NativeScript. So trying to find reasons to write a NativeScript application. And my other pick, because I've never picked it in the times that I've been on the show, is the Angular CLI. Use it; it makes your life a lot easier with writing applications.
You can't pick that.
Oh, I just did. So there's a lot of really interesting things coming down the pipe with the CLI. So keep an eye out for that.
All right, Austin.
You know what I mentioned earlier, the animate talk, not anime, animate at NG Europe. I really need the expressions. And so I'm really excited about what's coming out of that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and we'll have a link for all this in the show notes. And Alyssa, how about you?
I don't have a pick. I'm so sorry. I was ill prepared for the pick session.
I think your pick is to go vote. Tell everybody to go vote.
Go vote, please.
Yeah, if you're in the US, 953 people watching live right now. Go vote. All right, and Justin.
All right, so my picks are this broadcast channel API and the channel messaging API in the browsers. Just kind of discovered this yesterday, so I'm kind of playing with that. The channel messaging API is this way to broadcast messages between browser contexts, kind of one-to-one, and then the broadcast channel is a way to do one-to-many. Channel messaging is more widely supported than broadcast channel right now, but it's kind of a way where you can, in JavaScript, channel and then subscribe to it, and then from different browser tabs, different like an iframe within your page, be able to communicate back and forth. So checking that out.
Cool. Thanks, Justin. All right. So, and my last pick is AngularAir. I'm picking this show. It is something that I picked up from Quincy Dodds, took over from him a year and a half ago, something like that. And it's been great, but I actually, with, like I mentioned, a lot of the stuff that I'm starting to work on now, time is like crazy. And, especially with, a big team where like I have to, in the short term at least, spend a lot of time mentoring and getting everybody up to speed. It's hard to justify pretty much anything outside of just doing this one thing. And like for a long time, I've actually spent a lot of time kind of like splitting myself into a million different pieces, doing like 6 different open source projects and a podcast and blogs, and in addition to like my normal 9-to-5 job. And that's all well and good, especially when you're bootstrapping. Like it actually works really well, because like that's how you kind of like community and kind of get the feedback that you need when you have such a small team. But when we're on this kind of shortened time frame, where like when you accept VC money, kind of the downside, it's that basically you got to show returns in a very short time frame, or it's like all or nothing, right? So I'm kind of putting all my eggs in a short time period, and so that means kind of stepping back a little bit from AngularAir. So fortunately, Justin and a lot of the other panel members have kind of stepped up and have been doing an awesome job, and so they're going to kind of continue and make the show even better. And I am going to still come back and join the show as a panelist from time to time when I do have a little bit of breathing room or have something to talk about or whatever. But as far as like most of the weekly activities, I've already started paring down, as I'm sure Justin's been doing a lot more of the hosting, and I'll continue. So Justin and I have a lot of big plans for the future, and like it is going to just get better. Nothing it's no bad, and nothing bad is happening. Like it's all good. But yeah, it's just one of these things that I'm going to have to be more in the back seat than the front seat for a while. So, which I'm fine with, because all of you guys here and everybody else who's involved with Angular is just awesome. So, yeah, that's basically it. All right.
Well, hey, we definitely want to say thank you for everything that you've done up to this point. I mean, you've it took over, made an awesome show, and it's really accelerated, keep this thing alive, and brought a lot of great content to the community, got a lot of us involved, and I mean, you can't ask for anything more, right? But thank you.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Justin. So, yeah, let me know if. Thanks, Mike. Let me know if anybody has any questions, but we'll be back next week and every week thereafter, and so all right.
Carry the torch.
Yeah. All right, guys. Have a good weekend, everyone. See ya.
See ya.